Sensationally silver, because you are.
Welcome, everyone, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age, people who are going to bring you information, inspiration, and validation. Join us. Hi, everybody, and welcome again, hopefully, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age. My guest today is Chris Goldblatt, and he's going to tell you about the incredible experiences that he went through that caused him to create what he's involved in now. He's the head of the Fish Reef Project. Chris, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, Robin.
Tell us what that is and why we all need to know about it.
Well, the Fish Reef Project is a world leader in biogenic reefing, which is where we transform empty seafloor that's mostly mud and sand into thriving marine ecosystems using man-made structures, mainly one that we produce called a sea cave, which looks like an underwater concrete turtle shell. And we have thousands of these all around the world. And when you put them down, you can build entire kelp and coral ecosystems with all the fish and the lobsters and all of the critters down there. And it's a wonderful place to be in this time and place in history is involved in this project.
Because reefs have been disappearing, haven't they?
Yeah, so there's misunderstanding about reefs and what reefs really are, right? I mean, reefs can be, what we think of historically as sort of like, rocky intertidal habitat. That's the proper expression where you have from either boulders or ledges. And that's where all the biodiversity, well, the majority of the biodiversity in the life tends to live is the reefs. That's why they're important to protect. They're very important for the worldwide food production. But here's what most people don't know. If you look at the seafloor as a contiguous thing, it covers three-quarters of the planet, but it's mostly mud and sand. So we tend to look at the reefs as these sort of valhallas, these oases of life, which they are, but they're a vast minority in relation to the rest of the seafloor. So when you have more reef structure, you have more life, and that's why it's important to build on to the existing reef structure that's there and create additional thriving underwater oases.
So, what you're saying, which I never thought about before, is that maybe most of the seafloor is basically what we think of as a desert if we were just talking about land that isn't underwater. And you're creating oases in that desert. Is that
Yeah,
it?
that's exactly true. And that does one of two things. It compensates the ocean first and foremost um, for humankind's use of the ocean and in some cases abuse of it. Right. So like the song says, you got to pay the rent somehow. And this is a way for mankind to pay the rent to use the ocean, is to improve the reef structure through what we call biogenic reefing. So, like, here's a little model. This is a sea cave, right? This is just a little guy, but in real life, they're 6 feet by 4 feet by 3 feet, and they weigh 2,200 pounds and they go right down on the seafloor and we put them in clusters of 16 and we space them out, the clusters by about 10 feet. And then the kelp, if you watch the videos on the website, the kelp just naturally settles and grows and you can get your kelp forests back, which we've proven works in Baja, Mexico, and right here in California. We're the only permitted entity operating like this in both California and Baja, and our foreign projects, by the way, which are in Senegal, Kenya, Madagascar, Papua New Guinea, and Bangladesh has been in the works for a long time. So we do work around the world as well.
But those don't have to necessarily be permitted like California does.
They do. Each country has its own very unique permitting scheme, right? So California is by far the most complex in the world that I know of. It took us 10 years to get the 11 state and federal permits to do a small pilot project right here off Santa Barbara. And that's going to now be expanded to 65 acres. It won't take us 10 years because we've gone through it once. But that's an expensive, difficult process. And by comparison, in say Florida, where they have the largest reefing program in the United States, it'll take about a month and $1,000 to go through a similar type process. So there's a huge disparity. And then in some countries, it's you just work with one agency or ministry, or sometimes you have to work with many of them. It just depends where they are in their organizational evolution.
Why is it so difficult in California?
Well, the short answer is money. That's the short answer because there is money provided to the state of California from an excise tax on fishing tackle. 10% of all fishing tackle in the United States gets taxed, goes to the federal government, and then it gets dispersed to the states by population. And in most states in the union, that money is used to make man-made or artificial reefs because that's what the people lobby for and want. And the state runs those programs. In California, the money gets used for other things. It does not get used to make reefs. So there is not a state-run program. So that just leaves a private entity like Fish Reef Project, a private public nonprofit like the Fish Reef Project, to fill that gap that the government, the state government, is currently not filling.
So, Chris, maybe people are thinking, well, why is this man doing this?
Mm-hmm.
I know something of your story because I heard you speak here in Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Tell our audience why you're creating these little caves that promote the reefs. What's the story?
Well, I grew up at a time and place. It was kind of a dichotomy. I grew up in Malibu, and it was a very humble existence where I grew up, and that's putting it lightly. But it was rich in beach access. It had access to six of the best beaches in California. It was a 2 mile walk each way with dive gear. But from a very young age, starting at 8 years old, it was a way to feed myself and my family. And then that grew into sort of a career and a passion. I became a small scale commercial fisherman. And then I was a seafood trader. I pioneered what is now the sustainable seafood movement almost 30 years ago. And in that process, I learned to make very primitive reefs in Santa Monica Bay, where you have thousands of acres of just mud. And if you want life, you have to put structure down there. And I started that at like 13, 14 years old. So I was able to see this incredible dividend that structure on the seafloor yields. But then in 2003, I was in a terrible boating accident where in the middle of the night, the boat I was on was sliced in half by a petroleum barge in the middle of the channel, halfway out to San Clemente Island in the middle of November, just after Thanksgiving. And the ship was split in half. I gave the order to abandon ship and I jumped in the water, full of, just, I was really beat up, bleeding badly to try to get out of the cabin. And I was just treading water out there in the middle of the night in 2,000 feet of water in my boxer shorts, bleeding, waiting to die, basically. And the barge just sailed off. It didn't even know it had run us over because it was unmanned. It was being towed by a tugboat 900 meters to the north, basically. And when you're in a situation like that, it you'll tend to make deals, basically. I mean, ask anybody who's ever been in a foxhole. So, excuse me. And it wasn't a fully crystallized thought, but I spent a lot of my life taking sustenance out of the ocean, seafood out of the ocean to feed myself and to sell it and make a living. And I'm proud of that fact. I'm not embarrassed about it, and I do defend the right to fish for sure. But I wanted a way to sort of balance that equation, right? So I became committed to, uh, you know, creating a mechanism that would create more life than I personally had extracted. And then it became, how do I create a mechanism that can create more life than all of humanity extracts, right? That's a big, that's,
Big goal.
that's a big ask. I think we take like 1 billion pounds a year of stuff out of the ocean, and we probably kill many times more than that through human impacts, through warm water intakes for nuclear power plants and drainage and all kinds of just usage of the ocean. Climate change is right at the top of the list. So it took a long time to formulate what is it that we were going to do, and we settled on making reefs. And then we had to learn how to do this. There was no guidebook for it, how to manufacture, how to permit, how to deploy, just absolutely nothing, especially in California where there wasn't an existing reef program for us to go mentor from. So we started with a technology from Florida, and eventually we invented our own system, which can make very large reefs very quickly. It's something you can do at scale, but the reefs are strong and durable, and they last for the design life is 500 years underwater. So it's truly a mechanism to recover our kelp forests, to recover our coral ecosystems, and to provide sustainable marine protein, fish and food for small scale fishermen around the world so they can perpetually feed themselves and work, even through like drought cycles in Africa where all the crops die because there's no water. But if you create a place for fish to live and they can take a few of them and eat them, they can make it through that. And wild marine protein is like the healthiest thing that you can eat. I mean, there's nothing in it other than what nature put in it, right? So and there's a part of man that has to man and woman that has to remain kind of wild, right? As we move into this technological future, we don't want to become too domesticated because that's what kills the human soul. You want to remain a little bit wild because, at the end of the day, humans we're animals, right? And we come from the wilderness. So it's okay to remain a little bit wild and get your food from the wilderness.
That's
So it's all
really,
of that packaged into one.
yeah, that's really well put, that we do need to remain a little bit wild. If that only means appreciating nature and being in nature in some
Mhm.
way so that we are in touch with our own roots.
Mhm.
I want to tell this silly little story. Well, it's not silly, it's really sad. I had a friend who had a daughter who was in school. She was in about sixth grade and she was a vegetarian. And another little girl said, "Why are you a vegetarian?" And she said, "Because I don't eat cows." And the little girl said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "I don't eat meat, and meat comes from cows." And this other little girl said to her, "No, it doesn't. It comes from Vons," which is very funny, but very scary when you think, here's this generation or more who are so removed from the farm that they don't know where meat comes from.
Mhm. Right.
That,
It's
that's
going to
really,
get even worse when meat is grown in laboratories, right? It's going to get even more confusing. So I go back to the stay wild part of that equation.
yeah, yeah. Stay wild. So just for a little moment more, Chris, tell us about that foxhole prayer, what,
Wow.
what that was about.
Well, I think it's about like, what lessons can I share from that, right? And when you go through a near-death experience, everybody has their own version of it. I think there were really a couple of key takeaways. One is that, you know, if you get PTSD from something like that, and then you want to go back and because my relationship with the ocean is essentially my relationship with life. It's given me everything that I have. So to now be terrified of the one thing that I, was so connected to, how do you rebuild a bridge back to that? If you suffered PTSD from, say, combat, um, at least you don't necessarily have to go return to that combat once you're out of the theater of combat. And a lot of people who suffer these accidents at sea, they set ashore and they move to Montana or something. They never go back to sea, typically. So the project it is a way for me to maintain that connection. Um, but it's an important lesson that you can overcome the jitters from something like that. But it takes a lot of work. It's not a straight shot. But I think one of the most valuable things is we live in such a litigious society, and there were lawsuits filed after, and the other five people I was with got all kinds of money, and you know, my late mother, she encouraged me not to participate in the lawsuit, and at the time I didn't really understand it, but I listened to my mom's advice, and the fact that I didn't have to own the victim mentality and stand in front of a jury and say, I am a victim, give me some money. Um, that was really key to me being able to do this project, where it was because once you claim to be a victim for the rest of your life, you're essentially a victim in one shape or form or another. And so, but I was given this great gift of propulsion. It propelled me to do this for the rest of my life. So yeah, and I got my life out of it. So there's really nothing victimizing about that.
So it transformed from being, as you say, being a victim and taking, like, I'm owed something because I suffered,
Hmm.
to I was given my life back. I almost lost it. And now I'm going to give back.
Yeah.
Very, very different stance to take. Yeah. That's inspirational, Chris. It really is. I was talking to somebody the other day about something that was similar, and she was very angry still, years and years and years later, at a man who had discounted her near-death experience. But she's gone ahead and made that experience and the gathering of people who have had these near-death experiences her whole focus. So in a way, that man gave her this gift. He gave her a whole purpose for her life because she's so excited about doing this. Yes, he was, discounting what she said, but that's what made her mad enough to pursue it. And for
It's
you, it made
true.
you grateful enough
Yeah.
to pursue getting back into the ocean and giving back to the ocean. I
Yeah.
think
You have to flip that script, right? So it's just even if no matter what you suffered, even if it's a difficult childhood or something like that, that those are the things that forge great efforts. I think if you were to look at anybody who ascended, I think you would find something like that in their past. So it really is it is a blessing. It's just something that you have to take the good with the bad. There are side effects from getting traumatized, but you have to work your way through that, and that's just part of the deal. Just part of the deal. No,
it's like paying your dues, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. But then you have this experience. If we can look for the gift in what we wouldn't have chosen to go through, there is always a gift in it. There always is if we're willing to look for it. And
There-
I contend that the people with the greatest character have all been through something really difficult. If you haven't, life is kind of bland. But if you've struggled and overcome anything, it builds your character. I
it
think,
does.
yeah, I think often parents these days, they want to save their children from every trauma of any degree. And I think it's such a mistake. Somebody did an experiment many years ago with dogs where they raised these puppies with absolutely no stresses, no germs, no this, no that. They didn't survive.
Hmm.
We need that stress. We need those things to push up against and to
Hmm.
test ourselves against. And many of them we would never, never, never choose, but they are the biggest gifts ultimately. That's certainly been true for my life. And it sounds like it's been true for yours too.
Yeah, it's definitely the case. And the other thing it does is when you have a purpose burned into you that deeply, and the fear of death more or less abates. I'm not saying that wouldn't feel nervous about walking in front of a train or something, but that lingering, oh my God, I'm going to die. That does, at least in my experience of near death experience, did more or less vaporize. And I've had to be in situations to get this done where no amount of salary or fear of getting fired would ever buoy the situation. At one point, we worked at the United Nations for 8 years to create high-level relationships to get into these countries, and that was a very difficult experience trying to get the entire world to see things our way through the UN. And there were times and places where folks in there didn't want us to succeed because they had their own agendas, to put it lightly. There was a time where the security services at the UN came up and said, "You need to." We were at the time we were meeting in Jamaica. You need to go to the other end of the island for a few days because it's not safe for you here. And when the, when you hear that, you're like, so let me get this straight. I'm just making reefs for the world, and my life is not secure because I'm interfering with somebody else's agenda, who may have other plans for the ocean that I don't necessarily share. Let's just say it had to do with deep sea minerals and things like that. And that's where you have really deep conversations with yourself. You say, am I willing to go all the way and risk my life to get something like this done? Am I willing to risk all of my money to get this done? My existence? And it was really good I had that time for reflection because the answer came back, yes, I am willing to do that. And this intense calm came over me after I accepted that risk. And everybody around me could sense that. And all of a sudden, anything that appeared like a threat just kind of vaporized. As soon as everybody accepted that myself and my group were essentially true believers in what we're doing.
That fear of death can motivate us in so many ways that take away from the life that we live.
Mm-hmm.
And to lose that fear of dying, I remember one of my guests on this podcast said, make friends with your death.
Mm-hmm.
He was a doctor in his 80s. And he said, make friends with your death. And I love that phrase because it's not something we get to avoid. We're not going to get exempted because we've been good or been careful or whatever. It's still going to happen. So to lose that fear, what an enormous gift. And this podcast is aimed at persons of age.
Mm-hmm.
We're closer to that final breath in this lifetime than younger people are, for the most part. There are always accidents and things that happen. Chris, make what you're doing relevant to persons of age in this podcast. Tell us, me included, why this is important to us, for us to understand, for us to support in whatever way we can.
Yeah. So yeah, I was really happy when you invited me to come on and talk about that because we've been around for 16 years as an organization and, really fully functional for about 8 of those in terms of building the reefs around the world. And for so much of that time, there wasn't money to pay salaries. There's still really not. All of our money goes into the project. At some point, we would like to be able to pay folks, including myself. But until that happened, folks right at the end of their career, or maybe that have just retired, a number of them came towards us and they have been invaluable because so maybe they have 8 or 10 physical good years left to put into it, but that's actually an ocean of time if you couple it with that life experience that they have, the knowledge and wisdom that they have, um, the fact that they're not like clocking hours. Maybe there's somebody who's used to making $600 an hour, but that's no longer part of the equation. And they're really just interested in the outcome and the legacy that it creates because these reefs last for 500 years. So it's a tremendous legacy to leave permanently. And their availability, right? Availability is a huge thing because everybody's schedule is so thin sliced these days, right? Somebody who has the time, a lot of retired folks usually have some kind of critical asset like a boat or, a good truck or some tools or something of that nature. Um, I mean, they don't necessarily have to be full watermen that have like the folks that work for us. They can have other things to contribute. I get asked to do a lot of public speaking, having other folks that maybe can help share the message when I'm not available, things like that. Um, that is really important. And I think that there's a grander societal lesson there, whereas artificial intelligence, takes away a certain amount of jobs, there's going to be a large cohort of people that do have savings and time and money that may even be younger that have to learn from the retired folks about how to repurpose their lives like that. So I don't want the retired folks to be afraid to approach us because they have been genuine assets. Let me give you a couple of examples. Our chief marine engineers, he's a Frenchman, French American by the name of Frederick Ducedam. He's been there for since the beginning, and he was working for the last 4 years that he knew us. So he contributed a small amount, and then when he retired, he basically went into the full time. So he shadowed it through the end to become full time. Then we have another fellow by the name of Hank Goebbels, who's a retired nurse who has a small boat and he's available to take out our science team and things like that. Um, and those are two good examples and I cannot overstate how important those people have been to us.
One of the things that people start thinking about when they know they're going to retire often is, okay, now I get to play because I want to have fun. I want to have a good time. It's my turn. But one of the things I know, and maybe this isn't true for everybody, but it is true for me, is my greatest happiness comes from being of service.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so good
Mm-hmm.
giving something rather than looking for something to take. Searching for entertainment, for distraction, whatever. The opposite of that for me is to be of service. And that's where the fulfillment comes from. And I think that's something that people often learn in retirement, that it's not enough to just sit around and get to do whatever you want, because there isn't a lot that you want to do that's really fulfilling unless you're giving in the area maybe where you're interested.
Mm-hmm.
If someone is interested in the ocean, what a great place
Mm-hmm.
to become involved at some level. And it sounds, Chris, like you're saying there's always something somebody can do for us to help this keep on happening.
There is. If even if it's just sharing the message, if they have a social network, certainly financial contributions are a big part of it. We're trying to raise the next $1 million just to permit and get through the Santa Barbara project, which is 65 acres. And then we're working on all the projects around the world. So there's legacy opportunities there. And then there's like physical and in-field uh, opportunities. It certainly runs the gamut. What I do try to dissuade people from, and this happens with nonprofits, unfortunately, is people will come in kind of for a warm and fuzzy and use up a lot of our very precious time and resources to feel good about themselves for 5 minutes and then move on. Um, I'd appreciate it if they would find they can go call Greenpeace for that one. And serious serious folks only. But again, you don't have to necessarily be somebody out there swinging a hammer. There's a lot of opportunity.
That's an interesting point. I personally think that if we're giving any kind of donation, if it really is a donation, it needs to be anonymous, because otherwise it's probably public relations or some kind of self-advertising or self-promotion or whatever. True giving is just giving because we give, not because we want credit for it.
So true. And our first donor that got us started was Steven Hillenberg, the creator of SpongeBob SquarePants. And he made sure that the donation was completely anonymous. We had to sign an NDA. He sadly he's passed on, so that doesn't apply anymore. But that was a really wonderful thing, and he didn't want any exposure for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Different motivation. Okay. So, Chris, tell me what your life's like now. I mean, this has all been gravy since you didn't die in the ocean all that time ago.
Right.
You're a busy man, it sounds
Yeah.
like. And the paths that you've traveled. I mean, how many of us can say we've gone to the UN to try to make a case,
Hmm.
being able to give back to the world? Wow. So what is your life like now?
It's right? The whole thing's a long play, right? So, I'd say we have the first 16 years into it, and then there's a 20-year roadmap for the rest of it, right? So um, the projects that have been in development in places like Madagascar, and Senegal, and Kenya, those reefs are all starting to go into the water this year. One of the more exciting ones is down there in Papua New Guinea, where in a lot of these, how can I put this? There's a deep, deep, deep appreciation for what we do on right in the areas and towns where we do this, because those folks make it through the day hand to mouth. So this is direct sustenance and work for folks. And it is a challenge to work in some of these places. You do have security issues. In Kenya, we work up on the northern edge, on the border of Somalia, where one day we may actually make a reef in Somalia, and that's not an exaggeration. So you do work in areas that are either conflict zones or border conflict zones. Um, and so I'm continuously trying to map out the geopolitical components of it. But that part is genuinely exciting, working with kings and presidents and prime ministers and celebrities and that whole thing, all the way from the top to the most humble of fishermen, folks that sometimes can't even afford a t-shirt. And I was one of them for many years. So that's why I'm able to run that gamut. Or as Sun Tzu in The Art of War would say, you have to be able to work with higher and lower forces. I'm not disparaging anybody, but you have to be able to run the gamut. Usually you only work in one thin slice, but this has to be the entire thing, from suit and tie all the way to boots on the ground. And I have to be good at all of it. I have to be good at all of it. So it's the ultimate sort of polyglot situation where I have to really be able to dance on a lot of weddings, and that part's fascinating.
You not only got your life back, you got an incredibly exciting life.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Wow. Yeah. And I feel the gratitude, Chris.
Mhm.
I sense that about you, that's the motivation in your life is gratitude and giving back. And I admire that a lot. So we're out of time.
Okay.
And I want to ask you what I always ask people at the end of an interview. What are your words for our audience? What do you want to say to them?
I would say, to reiterate my original message, that um, trauma is a gift. It's hard to believe. I mean, it's not something you want to actively pursue and go smash your head into a wall and say, I'm traumatized, right? But it is a gift. And we're marketed that once you've been traumatized, now you don't have to do anything else. You just live in the trauma the rest of your life, because that's good for business, for people who want to sell you stuff. And that's not the case. It's just not the case. It's your fuel to go do something great.
It's your fuel to do something great. Wow. All right. Chris, I really can't thank you enough. I'm very moved. And I want to thank all of you who have joined us today. And I want to ask you to tell your friends to listen or watch, especially watch. Just seeing the background that Chris is presenting himself before, this beautiful reef that's full of life. What an inspiration on so many levels. So thank you, Chris, and thanks to all of you who have joined us today. We've got great news for you. Our products that support this podcast, our Sensationally Silver shampoo and conditioner, are now on Amazon. Super, super, super easy to find and to enjoy. So thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Robin.
Great news, everybody. Our premier hair care product line, Sensationally Silver, is now available on Amazon. You can order it so easily, you can get it so quickly, and you can be so sensationally silver.
Sensationally silver.